Companies do fail. Sometimes stocks do fail. Understanding the difference between the place you work, a company you may own, and a stock that you invest in all create three different opportunities, all have three different risk factors that are with them. You need to understand the difference and understand what it really means to be in one of those companies. We're going to break that down for you today on Consider This Program in each of that light, whether it be a company that you work for, a company that you own, or an investment that you've made in another company. What happens when they fail? How do you regroup? How do you process? Join us on Consider This Program today. Good morning and welcome back to Consider This Program. I am your host, Joe Clark.
And I'm Grant Soliven.
Happy to have you along, Grant, and you folks taking your time to educate yourself about what is going on in this crazy world we live in. Now, we are going to talk today, the whole theme of the thing is what keeps you up at night. And for a lot of people, that really is something failing, something beyond their control. There tends to be three different ways, Grant. It can be a place you work, right? It can be a place that you own, right? Or it can be an investment that you have made. So you are one of the 34 team members at the Financial Enhancement Group.
Yes,
right?
sir.
So you work for one of those entrepreneurial crazy people as they, people don't think I'm as crazy anymore as I once was, but pretty much the same thing. How does it feel to work for a small business?
Fantastic.
Why?
You're not a number on a key card.
That's the good part. What's the risk?
Risk is, if you're too crazy, I maybe have a job.
Things can happen much quicker.
Yes, they can.
We're not Coca-Cola. We're not IBM, right? And so you have some rewards.
Yes.
And you have some risks, right? So when you think about your 401k, you're going to see words that start with CAP. Remember, CAP doesn't stand for capital. It stands for capitalization. A little bit different, similar meaning, but a little bit different. But you're going to hear the words large cap, mid cap, and small cap. Small cap are small companies. Now, remember, folks, there are many more companies that are privately held than publicly held. Many, 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 many more. Some of the biggest companies in the United States are not publicly traded. You don't have access to their information. They don't have to release it. And that is a good thing. They can actually focus on running a business. But when you have a small company versus a large cap company, you can expect greater opportunities, right? That means more volatility by definition. The company can appreciate, the stock can appreciate much more, right? Or it can go down a whole lot quicker, right? Because they don't necessarily have all of the safety nets that are in place. So one of our young men, Andrew Thrasher, he doesn't like me telling this story because he thinks I've told it enough. I will be telling it forever. Poor Andrew Thrasher was one of my students at Purdue, was in a class a couple of years before Grant at Purdue, and went to work for a financial planner in Florida. This is the 2006 era, probably. No. It would have been 2010, 2011 era, somewhere in there. Anyhow, ended up getting laid off. The guy had to, shut down his firm for all intents and purposes. And so he ends up at the Financial Enhancement Group. He's working with me. And the first week, either the banker's in my office or I'm in the bank's office, which is what he had just experienced, right?
Right.
And you talk about what keeps you awake at night. He comes in and he's got his little knuckles clenched and he said, tell me we're okay, right? And in my case, we were buying out the CPA partners that we had. In the case before, they were trying to figure out how to stay alive. But, it's that fear. It's a lot of volatility. The volatility worked very well for him, right? And us being able to buy out the firm. And, we've been very, very blessed. We're much larger than we were. But it could have gone the other way. That's one of those risks. And you asked me how many companies fail, and the answer is most of them. Right? We're going to celebrate our 25th anniversary next year for the Financial Enhancement Group. We were started in 97. And it's mind-boggling. I can't imagine a day without the Financial Enhancement Group. I've never done anything else. This is my 33rd year in the industry. But it's still, the majority of companies don't make it to year 5. And you're depending on the industry, you're very, very low between 5 and 10, and then very few make it after that. We celebrate at Chambers of Commerce companies that have been around for 25 because they do tend to make it in one way or the other in terms they're merged or acquired. You also asked me the question, I'll let you ask your question, but
You're okay.
How do you become an entrepreneur? And I was fortunate enough to earn the Entrepreneur of the Year award for Madison County back in 2017 or 18.
Yeah, I think it was 18.
You were there, and it was a wonderful thing. And everybody wanted to talk to me about the success that we'd had at the Financial Enhancement Group. And instead, I told the story about the company that didn't make it.
Right.
Nobody asked, and this is important for you to remember in your portfolio. It's important for you to remember with your advisors and investments that you make. Nobody asks what's wrong when things look like they work, right? We will almost invariably learn more from mistakes than we do from successes. And so we do a lot of what we call experience transformers and post-mortem things, trying to figure out, okay, it looked like it worked, right? But what could we have done better? And again, one of the best times to ask what was wrong is when it appeared like it worked and everything was good, right? When people are really happy, you have to work a little bit harder to get some of the ugliness out of them. I will also tell you, though, that not everybody who runs a company is an entrepreneur, and that's not a bad thing. I don't think you can wake up one day and decide to become an entrepreneur. That's really my answer. You're either wired that way or you're not. America has more entrepreneurs per capita. It's about 3% of us, they believe, than any other place in the world. And it's because normal people didn't get on boats to go across the ocean that could have possibly been flat for financial freedom and starvation, just to get away to be able to have other choices.
Right.
These were not normal people on the Mayflower. And that's bred those of us that are here that are in that entrepreneurial spirit. When things don't work is really how you have to recruit and figure out where you're going to go from there. So let's take it through the average person. You have a death of your company. So one, Grant, I'm working someplace, I'm an employee, and I get laid off, fired, or the company just goes under. What do I do?
First thing you do is hopefully contact someone like us to help you figure out next steps. Because again, there's a lot of important decisions to make. Number one, do I have enough reserves of capital to get me through till I find that next position? Do I use capital if let's say I've had that entrepreneur spirit my whole life, but no one ever helped me tap into it. I need to use resources for that. How does that work? And Joe, is as ugly as it can get for some of us that are all of a sudden out of a position or a job, it really opens up opportunity from a tax perspective in some cases. So like you said, it's not always easy or fun to talk about how to use something like a job loss as an opportunity, but sometimes they do present themselves.
Yeah. Lemonade out of lemons anytime you can. We used COVID last year on multiple occasions where somebody had income variability, meaning they had a very low income last year for 2020 because of the predicament they were in. And we did Roth conversions. We pulled money out of IRAs where the 10% penalty, believe it or not, was cheaper than them pulling money out at a normal tax rate. Right? I mean, sometimes you have to look at what the end result is, not just the rules that you've been given. Right? And you've got to be able to sit down and do the math. As we talked about on a show from a week or two ago about the Secure Act and how stretch rules were changed. You can bet your sweet bippy I'm going to tell people to do some things when your beneficiaries are there and your kids are trying to take some money out that they haven't thought about yet. And it's a different way of looking at life as opposed to the confines of what we have. I think so many times when we're looking at our own situation, we see a singular solution. And sometimes there are multiple solutions if you understand all of the other things that go along with it. And that's really where having those relationships with fiduciaries and people that can look at it empathetically as opposed to sympathetic. And that's important. And I don't know, did you ever, Zig Ziglar explained to me years ago what the difference was between empathy and sympathy. Are you familiar?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So in sympathy, you cry, I cry. In empathy, you threw up over the balcony of the boat from seasickness and I get you a warm rag. I am as emotional as anybody you will probably ever meet. But when things are down and things are bad, you want the collective of people who have been there before to try to help you figure out how do we fix this, right? So if you've lost your job, how do you access the 401k? Where does that liquidity come from? Grant is right. Do you have enough liquidity? You will never feel you have enough liquidity if tomorrow is uncertain. But the best thing you can do is have somebody explain to you how much liquidity you really do have and try to work from there. If it's your company, you got to figure out how to regroup, right? You've got to understand a lot of companies in 2020 went bad, not because of anything that they did, right? They just happened to get caught in a bad circumstance.
Right.
Now, here's the doozy. Are you ready for this? There are some of you out there who happen to think that 2020 you did really, really, really well because you wound up being on the right side, right? You wound up being on the right side of the trade. And that wasn't necessarily anything that you thought yourself through. That was just what happened. That was circumstance. And I think one of the worst things we can do is confuse ourselves with luck and skill. And that happens a lot in the money management world.
Yes,
So
it does.
we really, really look at this. So I always give the example when we get into volatility and those kind of conversations. I've got 2 daughters, and let's say Grant's dog, one of his dogs drives a car, because you don't have a daughter, so I can't put it there. But no, your babies, because
Right.
our dogs are our
They
babies,
are
right?
our
I've got one of
babies.
those too. That's Othello. He listens to the show. My kids don't,
Right.
right? So Othello's with mom listening, right? The dog,
So our dog
it's
race.
Our dog, yeah, that's right. So our dog's getting a car,
Right.
and we race to Indianapolis, and Othello, right, is not going to go 100 miles an hour. Your dog, younger and dumber, right? He's
Smudge
going to
for
go
sure.
100 miles an hour.
110.
Right? And good Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, he's going to win the race.
100%.
Right? We are not going to get out and paw pup him.
No, we're not.
We're not going to raise our paw and say good job. We're going to talk to him about the police, about potholes, about all of the things that could have gone wrong, because any of us that have been around for a while have seen car wrecks. We've seen accidents. We've seen bad things happen, right? But that's what happens with risk in an investment portfolio, or when you make an investment and you have all of the money in one company. And I'm not talking about your own company. I'm talking about a stock where you've invested in somebody else's company. When you've got it all in one place and you compare something like 2020 where you wound up on the right side versus the bad side, so many times we give the attribution error to success, good thinking, and everything else. And it really was luck. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't think before investing. It doesn't mean that there's not reasons to use our risk barometer, not to do the research and everything else, but diversify, folks, because things can happen that we can't even imagine, right? We have to be prepared with a disciplined process in terms of how we're going to behave. So should you. YourLifeAfterWork.com, 800-928-4001.